Hi, everyone. For sake of time, I probably have to start now, but I guess people can trickle in while we do some review. Yeah, we just did the cat book workshop. And I thought I would take some time to review some things that were new in this new workshop because there's a lot of new stuff. So first, review. So in React, we started out and we learned about components. You have your website and you divide it into manageable pieces, and those are components. And each component you can write in its own file. So it's in a very organized system. Very nice. And these components, they can have their inputs, which we call props. And they can also have their own information, which is state. This is all stuff from the first lecture. And then we had a ton of new stuff. We talked about useEffect, we talked about get, we talked about post, we talked about router, but I'll get into all that in the upcoming slides. Okay, router. What is router? Router is literally just someone wrote this component that is very useful because it lets us separate our web page into different links. Like we might want to have our website, let's say our website is capbook.com. We might want to have a capbook.com/profile or a regular capbook.com or a capbook.com/second page. So that's what router is for. It just lets us display a different component depending on what the URL is. And that's it. That's all router is. It's some random guy wrote this component and we're using it. And that's what it does. Okay, and then we talked about useEffect and get requests, post requests. And what are those? Well, I'm going to explain them again using this weather app component that I created. So what this weather app does is it shows you the weather on the web page. So you go to the website and then it just shows you what the weather is. And right now, it just says that the weather is always cloudy, which is not entirely inaccurate, but we would want it to actually show something more useful. So what we can do is we can, like this one makes sense, right? We would try to get the weather from some server or somewhere, and then we set the weather to be the weather. That makes sense. That is how we can get the weather. But there's a problem with this, and this problem is something that Vincent alluded to in his lecture. And the problem is this get function takes time to do its stuff. Like it needs to go to the website where it has the weather, or it needs to go to the server where we get the weather from, get that information, and then bring it back here. And that all takes time. And get is an asynchronous function, meaning that before it does all of that, it just continues on in the code. So what would happen here is it does the constant actual weather is equal to get of that stuff. And then it sets the weather, but the get would not have finished. So what we really need to do is we need to wait for the get to finish and then set the weather to be whatever the get returned. And that's what the .then stuff is. So yeah, it's asynchronous, we need to wait for it to finish. So instead we use this .then syntax, and you can read it as English. It's like you get the weather and then you set the weather to be what you received. It just reads like English. That's what the .then does. It waits for these asynchronous functions to complete and then it does something. And the function that's in the then, it takes the result of the get request, and you can do whatever you want with it. So this is our new weather app, and in theory, it should work because we get the weather, we set the weather. But there's another problem with this. And to do that, I need to remind you guys of something. I guess we didn't emphasize this enough, but oh my God, my thing is hiding my little pop-up. Hide this. So there's this little thing of like, when the state or the props change, the component reruns all of its code. And you might be like, why does it do that? Well, I'll explain that soon, but for emphasis, I included this 3 times. Remember that components rerun their code whenever the states or the props change. And why? You might ask, why does it do that? And it's because if you ever set the weather, you probably want it to like change what it says on the website, right? Like you return this div with the weather in it. But when you call set weather, you'd expect it to like re-display the code on the page and have the weather be updated. So what React needs to do is it needs to rerun the code because things change. Like the weather just changed. Now we need to rerun this code to figure out what to return. So that's why React needs to rerun all the code whenever the states or the props change, because things update. Like you just need to, you need new HTML code now. So for emphasis again, I'm gonna go through that again. But okay, that's nice. And it's fine, like we can rerun the code. It doesn't, usually it's fine, like we just rerun the code. Nothing changes usually, but when stuff changes, then we just update, it just updates, and now the weather is whatever it's supposed to be. But the problem here is in this code, we get the weather from that API from the server. And then we set the weather to be this new weather that we just received. But because we just set the state, then React says, oh, okay, the weather's different. I have to rerun all the code again because I need to display this new weather. But then it sees the get request again and it says, oh, now I have to do the get request again because it's part of the code. I just have to do it again. So then it gets the weather again. And then it would set the weather to be whatever it received there. And then that causes it to render again. All the code's going to be run again. There's this infinite loop of getting the weather every time. And that's bad. We don't want that. We just want this get request to happen once. So to do that, we use useEffect. And useEffect lets you just run code once at the beginning. If you know this is not going to change, I just want to get the weather one time. And if any props, any state changes, that doesn't matter because the weather is, the weather won't change. Then you can use useEffect, and that lets you run this only once. So that's useEffect, that's get, that's then. And yeah, that's a quick little review of all the new stuff that we talked about. It's recapped here. Components run their code once at the beginning, and then once every time a prop or a state changes. We use useEffect to run stuff only once. And then we have get and post, which are asynchronous functions, and the routing. And then we did workshop 3. Workshop 3, we made this little post thing where you have a bunch of stories and you can make a new story. And we added a lot of components to Catbook. The new part is we had a feed now. It's outlined. I tried to color code it so you can see the feed is purple and the outline is in purple. And then we divide the feed into a bunch of cards. which are, those are the cards. And also this new story part where you can have a new story. And then we divided card into the actual story part of it and the box of comments. Then we divided the comments block further into individual comments and to the new comment portion. And if you like stare at the code for a while, you see that each of these little components has its own file and the code for it's in that file. So that's the division we did. And there was a ton of props and states flying around in the workshop. Like it probably was hard to keep track of what was props, what was state everywhere. But what happened was in the feed, what we did was we sent a GET request to get all of the stories. This happened in the feed. We sent a GET request, we put in our useEffect. And once we had those stories, we put it in state. So now our feed knows all of the stories. And then we passed in each individual story information to its own card. So we passed in the author anonymous, the content DSF to the first story. And then in card, we did another GET request to get the comments for that card, the comments for that story. And then we passed again the story information into single story. And single story just displayed that box. So it literally just took the content name, or it took anonymous, it took DSF, and it just put it on the screen in a header. Maybe it bolded something. And then the comments array, card sent it over to the comments block through a prop. And the comments block divided the array into each individual comment and sent over the appropriate information to be displayed in a single comment. And another thing that happened was that we needed an add new comment function to add a new comment. So we made that in the card component. That's where it was defined. And then we passed that down all the way to the new comment thing, down the tree. And we used it in new comment. That's how a lot of these things work. You'll make something in some component, it'll be state in some component, the information will be in some component, and then you'll pass it down to wherever you need it. So usually you have it up top and then you pass it down somewhere, you pass it down somewhere else. And yeah, that's the flow of information in React. Okay, so I want to do a quick poll. You have to pick one of the two options. Can you, okay, raise your hand if you understand React absolutely perfectly and you have no concerns. And then you have to pick one of the two. So raise your hand for if you're confused about something. Okay, so perfect. So what that means is you should use all the resources that we have for explaining things. So obviously during these lectures, it's hard to like explain things that well because I guess it's like 1 on 300. But what you can do is you can try to corner one of us. You can come to office hours. You can ask on Piazza. And we're more than happy to like explain things from the ground up, or like, even if you haven't been to a single lecture, we will try to explain things. And one-on-one, it'll make a lot more sense, honestly. I think every year in Web Lab, everyone's confusing the first week. And through office hours, through all the resources, people can catch up and figure things out. And also, when making your sites, a lot of it is just figuring it out yourself and thinking back to the lectures. So yeah, everyone's confused, but that's normal and it will work out. Also, what helps is staring at the workshops. So like, yeah, the workshops might have been confusing now, but if you just check out the workshops and even the earlier workshops, and just look at them and try to see what's going on, play around with things. Maybe it will help. But yeah, okay, now on to the main content, design and wireframing for this lecture. So this is exciting. It's not something we've talked about yet, but there's two things I want to explain. Two big concepts in design. I don't know if you guys have heard the term UI, UX. It's everywhere nowadays, but UI is the user interface. So you want your website to look good. That's UI. So colors, fonts, visual design, aesthetic. And then user experience is when you use a site, like, do you feel good using it? Can you figure out where things are? Yeah, that's user experience. So let's talk about user interface. So my friends and I, a while ago, we decided to make a website, and we tried to draft it out, as you guys will be doing this week. And this was our first version of it, before we knew anything about user interface. And we honestly did not try to make it look bad. Like, this was our honest attempt at a good website. But yes, we came up with this. Then as we learned more about user interface, fonts, colors, designing things beforehand, we improved it. Dan was one of the people who helped me. We worked on this together. Then we improved it. And we improved it. And honestly, it's still not the best, but like, it's better than the first version. So user interface helps. You can make your website look better through iteration. Here's the MIT website in 2003. Very ugly. And this is an MIT website now. I think it looks a lot better. Definitely room for improvement, but people can improve their user interfaces. So yeah, things you want to think about are fonts, color schemes, shapes, like adding, I don't know, buttons tend to look good when they have rounded corners. That's something I've noticed. You might want a square button, but it's all things to think about on your website. And yeah, like, you want to make your site look good. It's not that much effort to go from the top login to the bottom login. You add some CSS styles. It's a few lines of code, but users have so much of a better experience using the bottom login than the top one. It just feels so much better as a user of your website. People will be so much more impressed. Even though it's just like 5 lines of CSS compared to maybe hundreds of lines in your actual website. But yeah, user interface makes a huge difference. And another thing to think about is, how are people going to visit your webpage? You don't have to worry about this during Web Lab for sure, because we're making a website for 1 month. But if you wanted to continue this after Web Lab, maybe you would want to open your website on your phone and see what it looks like. This is a website that we made, but we forgot to look at it on our phone, and then people had a bad experience trying to use it. And okay, user experience. We just talked about UI, making your site look good. You're like, yeah, obviously, I'm going to make my site look good. Thanks for the tip. I wasn't going to make it look bad. But then there's user experience, and no one talks about user experience. So what is it? Let's do a quick poll. Which of these ketchup bottles looks better? Raise your hand for the first one. Raise your hand for the second one. Yeah, people like the first one. The first one looks a lot better. So UI designers, they might be like, okay, we'll design it like the first one. And then they give the ketchup bottles to users, and all the users hate the first one, and they love the second one. Why? You have to what? Yeah, the second one you can squeeze to get the ketchup out, and the first one, the ketchup just never comes out because it just gets stuck. So user experience is important. Giving it to users is important. I found this blog post where the guy was destroying a bunch of apps, which they tried to make it look so good, and they spent so much effort in making it look amazing. And if you look at it, you're like, wow, this is a beautifully designed app. But how do you use it? What does it do? I don't know. I have no idea what this app is, nor like if you give it to someone, they won't know what to do. So that's not good. This is something, radio. I just found this picture, but I don't know what it is, nor do I know how to use it. So it's not a good product. You want to do user testing. You want to put your website in the hands of users because, yes. So yeah, some examples of good UX are apps where you just hand it to them and they know what to do. A lot of the times I would show my websites to friends and they'd be like, oh, what do I do? And then I'd be like, oh, you do this, this is what it's for. But good apps, you don't need to tell them anything. You just give them the link and then they figure everything out. Because actual users, you won't be there to handhold them through the process. I have a quick little story that's kind of funny. There was this random company and they were like an e-commerce company. So they had like, there's something like Amazon. It wasn't Amazon, but some company, but you had a shopping cart. And after the users bought stuff on the website, they would need to log in. And then once they log in, they check out and the sale was completed. But then some guy had the idea of what if we just let them check out without them logging in? We added a checkout as guest option. And that one change increased the revenue by $300 million per year because users were just getting annoyed by the sign-in screen and leaving because they couldn't figure out how to sign in. So user testing, user experience, very important. So yeah, show your web app to your friends. Good strategy. Here's another explanation of trying to see how people use your site. You might think they'll do one thing, but everyone does a different thing. And that's something that's important. So yeah, we have Milestone 1 due over the weekend. I think we'll send out sign-up slots soon, probably. But basically what you're gonna do is you're gonna figure out your website idea and give a quick little pitch to us. And oh yeah, we're gonna give feedback on your milestone zeros by the end of today. So you'll have that and then you can try to pick an idea and flesh it out and give us a pitch to the website. But you also need to have designs. Here are the requirements on the website. You can find them. Here's a little picture of what will happen on Saturday or Sunday. We will just listen to your pitch for 3 minutes and you will show us your wireframes, which is your design. And then we will give you feedback. But what are wireframes? This is a weird word. What is that? It's basically just sketching out your site. So show us what it's going to look like. Not on paper. Don't use paper. I meant to remove that image. But you can use these tools to show us what the different pages of your web app will look like. It should be drafty. Like you don't know, like things will change in the next month, right? So don't get married to it. But yeah, you should design out your site. Don't use paper. I don't even know. This is probably not paper. But it should look something like this, where you just design out your site. We'll have more information about how to do the wireframe in Piazza. But how do you make it? You can use Google Slides. You can put in some images into Google Slides of your website. You can use random sketching softwares, or you could use Figma. And Figma is the way to go because it's what all the pros use for designing our websites. It's really simple to use, and I love it. So I'll try to do a quick little demo of Figma. You guys see this? But it's figma.com. So you just go to figma.com. I can just demo the process, figma.com. And then you make an account. You can make one with your team. It allows for collaborations, create a new team, and then new design file. And when you pop into it, you can get into the screen and you can just start designing your website. So like, let's say we want to make a search thing. You can do that. So I'm just gonna put in some text, web lab search. Let's make this search website. Make it font 60. You can drag things. So I'm gonna drag this. It has this cool layers thing. So you can see all the layers you create. I'll put a little search bar. Oh, so let's put a search bar. And then there's this really cool tab where you can see the CSS. So this is this thing in the way. But it shows you the CSS you're using. I can like add a little border radius, so maybe 20. I can set the background of this. So let's set a fill to be pink. You can like rearrange the layers. You can hide layers. But yeah, there's a lot of features here. There are a lot of resources online if you look up Figma, how to use it. But yeah, you just need to design out your web page. And I can show you some examples of Figmas that my friends and I have made for random ideas. Like we had this random idea of like a website where you put in your interests, and then we made this. This was an NBA game idea. This was a guess the song game idea. Another thing you can do is you can like copy paste entire frames or entire things. So like I can select all of this, copy it, new page, paste. And then I can like change the color of the nav bar. And then I can change the color of this background and see what looks the best. Like maybe I want it to look like this, and then maybe I want this to have a giant, like colored blue with width 5. But yeah, there are a lot of options. Like I was playing around with different themes of this. Here are more sites. I made different pages of the website, like what happens when you click the pop-up. You probably don't have to go into as much depth as this, but it's just an example of things you can do with Figma, how you can design out your web page. But yeah, that's UI UX, that's designing. Next is Mufaro, I believe, with how to set up a server. So yeah, excited to see your milestone ones.